It's Fox on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious, much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hey, Happy New Year, wonderful people, and welcome along to Monday's sparkling edition of the Mark Steyn Show. We have a stellar lineup of stories and guests for you today, so you will not want to miss a single second. We have another Rotherham grooming gang scandal exclusive for you this evening. You won't hear this anywhere else. GB News can reveal that another councillor from the former disgraced cabinet that stifled progressive discussions has been given a senior diversity and inclusion role within the NHS. You couldn't make this up. We'll be digging into this with our very own Charlie Peters, who has the story. The UK is now seeing 800 more people dying each week for conditions that should have been diagnosed during the advised lockdowns. It's excess deaths, people. We will speak with former ONS statistician Jamie Jenkins, who argued a year ago to the day pretty much, that COVID advisors getting their honours was a premature decision. We'll chat to him later on. Plus, a third of families identified childcare costs as one of their most expensive outgoings. But today, it's been reported that Rishi Sunak plans to shelve helpful childcare reforms proposed by his predecessor, Liz Truss. We'll get into this with the Deputy Director of Onward, Adam Hawksby. The proposed idea is to fix the UK's broken childcare system. Now, hear me out. This is a bit dramatic. But is the end of polishing shoes the total end of civilization? Top shoe polish brand Kiwi has announced they will stop selling shoe polish in the UK due to a lack of demand. It's decline, people. We are declining. Anyway, I'll be chatting to Joseph Robertson, shiny shoe connoisseur and director of think tank Orthodox Conservatives. Very jolly stuff, I know, but we'll always bring you the stories that matter most and, crucially, that you will not get elsewhere. And, of course, the most important part of the show, where you get to give me a right good pummelling. GBViews at gbnews.uk. You can ask me anything. Just put Pummel Patrick in your subject line. That's all coming your way. But first, it's the headlines with the wonderful Rhiannon Jones.
Patrick, thank you. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The first Channel migrants of the new year arrived at Dover Harbour today. GB News can reveal that dozens of young men were picked up from a small boat around 9 miles off the Kent coast. It's understood there were more than 40 people on board. It comes as UK and French authorities start patrolling beaches together for the first time in a bid to stop migrants from making the crossing. 3 people have died after a fire broke out at a hotel in Perth. Police Scotland confirmed 11 others were treated for minor injuries. Emergency services were called to the New County Hotel in County Place at around 5 this morning. The cause of the fire is still unknown. Health bosses are calling for the government to declare a major incident within the NHS over mounting pressure on the service. The Royal College of Emergency Medicine claims as many as 500 people could be dying each week because of delays to critical care. The government says it recognises the pressure faced by the NHS. Lisa King told GB News her husband would have survived if he'd been treated in time.
500 people a week dying in NHS hospitals because they were denied the treatment and appointments that they needed. What my husband died from was very treatable. He did not need to die. He should never have died. And for every one of those 500 a week that are dying, there is a family behind them. There is a husband, a wife, a partner, a son, a daughter.
Thousands of rail passengers will face yet more travel disruption this week. Members of the RMT and 14 train operators will stage 2 48-hour walkouts from Tuesday and Friday. Drivers from ASLEF will strike on Thursday. More than 100 national highway workers in England will also stage a 48-hour strike from tomorrow. And thousands of mourners are paying their respects to Pelé at the grounds of his former club, Santos. The Brazilian football legend died last Thursday. He was undergoing treatment for colon cancer. The three-time World Cup winner was 82. The procession will continue through the streets of his hometown tomorrow, followed by a private family burial. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Steyn with Patrick.
Does anyone else just not understand cancel culture at all? J.K. Rowling can be cancelled for saying that women are adult human females. The cast of Harry Potter, you know, those jumped-up millionaires who couldn't act to save their lives but became multimillionaires off the back of Rowling's magnificent creative mind. They don't even want to know her. Daniel Radcliffe especially, he'd be stacking shelves in Lidl if it wasn't for Rowling. Lady Susan Hussey, a national treasure, a lifetime of dedicated service to our royal family. She asks a woman of many different names, who is clearly confused about her own identity, where she was from. The confused charity magnate, who, by the way, may well have the Charity Commission on her case, Marlene Headley, then got Lazy Susan cancelled. In fact, she even forced her into a grovelling apology. People who said they had concerns about the COVID vaccine and dared to suggest that the coronavirus originated in a laboratory in China, despite the fact that some evidence appears to suggest that that's at least a possibility, well, they were cancelled by news outlets. They had freedoms restricted. People have been cancelled by their friends for supporting Brexit or for not wanting to live near a migrant hotel. People have been cancelled for thinking that Black Lives Matter is an inherently Marxist organisation and that taking the knee is nothing more than ridiculous virtue signalling. But people who allegedly tried to stifle an investigation into grooming gangs that systematically rape and abuse vulnerable young white girls, they don't get cancelled. They can get jobs in our public service. Presumably at the taxpayers' expense as well, by the way. This might sound unbelievable, but it isn't. GB News' very own Charlie Peters, who's been conducting a deep investigation into grooming gangs across the country, found that a former Labour Party politician who resigned his cabinet position at Rotherham Council in 2015 amid reports that he shut down discussions on the ethnicity of grooming gangs now works as a senior diversity and inclusion manager in a major NHS body. That's been revealed. You couldn't make this stuff up, could you? Maroof Hussain was embroiled in the Rotherham grooming gang scandal in 2015 when Dame Louise Casey's review into the council named him as it described the authority as being in denial and warped by a culture of bullying, sexism and cover-ups. Apparently, he's now working as the, you're going to love this, by the way, National Diversity and Inclusion Manager for Health Education England. So, Lady Susan Hussey asks a woman in traditional dress where she's from, cancelled. Man reportedly stifles investigation into 1,400 young girls being sexually exploited by British Pakistanis in Rotherham. He gets a job in diversity and inclusion in the NHS. In fact, the people who actually carried out the rapes and abuse, they weren't cancelled very quickly either, were they? Some would argue they still haven't been. In Rochdale, Adil Khan and Qari Abdul Rauf were members of that Rochdale grooming gang. Khan got a girl, 13, pregnant, but denied he was the father, then met another girl, 15, and trafficked her to others using violence when she complained. He still told a court that he hadn't committed that big of a crime. The pair were convicted in 2012, and it was October 2022 when they finally lost their appeal to deportation. In fact, not only were they not cancelled from Britain until recently, Ralph wasn't even cancelled from his own town. He was actually pictured shopping in a shop in the town where he abused children, which means they could have bumped into him at the shops. There are calls for J.K. Rowling to be burned alive for thinking that women are adult human females. There are calls for people to lose their jobs, never work again, become social pariahs for asking someone where they come from, for their views on immigration, Brexit and COVID. But if you happen to be someone who has tried to stifle an investigation into a British Pakistani child rape gang, you can get a job in the public sector. The world's gone mad. Here with me right now is GB News' very own documentary filmmaker with an exclusive for us. Charlie Peters, take it away. What's going on?
Well, it's an extraordinary story. I mean, I promised on your show a month ago that I'd be coming after people in Rotherham Borough Council who'd served during the period of this atrocity. And, well, we've got the first scalp with Dominic Belk, who's had to stand down as Labour's parliamentary candidate for Rother Valley, and now we have another in our sights here in Maruf Hussain. So Mr Hussain was in the council from the early noughties. Indeed, he was the cabinet member for community cohesion from 2005. Now, he was brought into the cabinet again in September 2014 when the Alexis J report revealed the extent of the suffering. She found 1,400 girls, as a conservative estimate, have been abused in the town. The National Crime Agency has since revised that up to 1,510. Now, while he was serving in the cabinet for that period after the J report, he had to resign in disgrace in February 2015, along with the leader, Paul Lakin, and the rest of the cabinet, when Louise Casey found that the council was in denial. Now, lots of people were referred to anonymously in this report by Dame Louise, but, you know, with Mr Hussain and indeed another councillor called Jahangir Akhtar, she went so far as to actually name them due to the seriousness of the allegations against them. Now, Akhtar and Hussain were both described as senior Pakistani members of the council who would influence decision-making and would influence the actions of the council. It was found in the report to have been stifling discussion into the rapists.
So some would call that a cover-up?
Well, I mean, those are words that I would certainly use. In fact, he pushed back against a police officer who wanted to investigate the link between the grooming gangs and taxi drivers. Mr Akhtar, his friend and colleague Jahangir, he was a taxi driver before he became a Labour councillor. So there was clearly an issue where people who wanted to look into the scandal were told not to.
Right, and what happened then was this stuff was all freely out there in the public domain, and one would assume, Charlie, that if you and I had done something along those lines, we'd be, well, maybe, I don't know, in prison, but I dare say not working again.
Yeah.
What's this particular chap doing now?
Well, extraordinarily, he cried racism first and foremost. So he accused a fellow Labour councillor, unnamed at this moment, of being racist when he tried to raise the issue of the ethnicity of the perpetrators in the town.
Just by saying that they happened to be British Pakistani men.
Precisely, just by raising a pattern which was observed by many people in the town and indeed lots of the victims and survivors.
Or the facts.
So, indeed, and indeed the truth showed it in both of the reports. But Mr Hussain allegedly made this accusation. The Labour Party today refused to confirm to GB News the outcome of the investigation after he was accused of making this false accusation of racism. The Labour Party also failed to confirm that he was still a member of the Labour Party. He might still be a member of the Labour Party, extraordinarily. But what we do know is that he works for the NHS in this diversity and inclusion and participation role for a body which is called Health Education England, which aims to inspire and educate and train the next generations of people working in medicine in Britain. So here is a man who survivors from Rotherham who've lived in the town for 30 years told me prioritised, this is their view, that he prioritised so-called community cohesion over justice for rapists, is now the national lead for diversity and inclusion at a major NHS body. I think it's scandalous.
Well, it certainly sounds like a scandal, Charlie, and I'm just going to add a little bit more fuel to this particular fire because in that role, one would imagine that it's the taxpayer paying his wages.
Yes, well, it is. It's a public body. It's a non-departmental public body, which is a form of essentially a quango within the government whereby you get lots of public sector cash and you're aligned with with a department, but you're not really within it. It's all very strange and murky. And we've contacted them for comment, that is Health Education England today. They did not get back to me in time to be involved in this coverage tonight.
No, we have contacted all the relevant parties. We have gone for a response from all the relevant parties with a varying degree of success, it must be said. And Charlie, as well, I just want to ask you, how on earth do you think it can be that we live in a society where if you are at least accused of covering up or stifling an investigation into an industrial-level child rape and grooming gang, that you can somehow find your way working in the NHS? Are there no checks here?
Well, fundamentally, nobody else is looking into this. What's been extraordinary for lots of my investigation for GB News over the last year, that I'm uncovering stories that have been lying in plain sight for years, in some cases for decades. Mr. Hussain has been in the NHS since October 2020. He was promoted a few months ago. So it's escaped criticism because people have moved on. People don't seem to care very much about
what's fascinating is that presumably, and there's no way of confirming this, but presumably on his CV, you would have, what was it, community cohesion?
Yes, a cabinet member.
Yeah, community cohesion. And that, if that job was done well, you could see why he might be a good candidate for the NHS diversity and inclusion thing. But someone would have only just had to have checked online to see how well or otherwise he did that job.
Well, I mean, he was on the front page of The Times on the 6th of February 2015. Finally, the truth after the lies, said the headline, his face bang on the front of the page. So clearly, due diligence has not been applied here, I presume. And the broader cases, I think, do you know what? I think EDI is often a huge racket where people promote each other, they promote their friends, and people get away with extraordinary backgrounds in this area if they say the right things.
And just finally on this, Charlie, we can't forget about the victims in all of this, even if society has, it would appear, even if the vast majority of the media has, even if our politicians have. And victims who've already potentially, not in Rotherham but in Rochdale, potentially had to bump into their perpetrators at the shops. Strong rumblings that a particular chap who was involved in the grooming gang scandal as well worked as a delivery driver, so you might have got a knock on the door one day, here's your pizza, and the guy who groomed you and raped you, etc. Yet again, this is a case, is it not, of victims being forgotten?
Absolutely, and the extraordinary thing, again, I mean, there are so many extraordinary things, I keep saying this because it really is the case, but many of the victims I've been speaking to around the country, not just Rotherham, Rochdale and Telford, but beyond, all the way up to Glasgow, all the way down to Bristol, many of them still live in fear. Because, as you said, they see their abusers in the street, they see them in the shops, they see them at work, they can't avoid them. A lot of them live anonymously. When they are activists, they do it under a fake name, you know? They have to write under a pen name. They live in fear because our society has moved on and justice has never been delivered for them.
But actually, it's about time the perpetrators and those involved in what was an industrial-level scandal but an industrial-level cover-up started being very afraid themselves. They've got away for this for too long, haven't they, just quickly?
I quite agree, and we need investigations into every major town and city where credible reports of these abuses have been taking place. If we can't bring them to justice this year, when will we?
Absolutely. Charlie, thank you. Thank you very much for everything that you do. Charlie Peters there, GB News' very own documentary filmmaker. We are not going to drop this, ladies and gentlemen. I cannot believe that it's as difficult as it has been to get this kind of stuff front and centre on the news agenda, because it is a proper pandemic. We've had one type of pandemic. We're going to come on to that in a little bit. But this is an ongoing pandemic. I just want to read out a comment from the Labour Party spokesperson in relation to what Charlie's just been talking about there. It says, all complaints are taken seriously and assessed in accordance with our rules and procedures. On background, we do not comment on any individual cases or individuals on the record because our disciplinary procedures are independent and confidential. Make of that what you will, ladies and gentlemen. Coming up, we have plenty more for you. We'll be getting stuck into the now knighted Chris Whitty's concerns over the rising levels of flu and heart conditions due to lockdown. Really, Chris? Really? I'm not sure you raised your concerns during the lockdowns, did you? In fact, I think you quite like lockdowns, Chris. Our stuntman, Jamie Jenkins, will be all over this like a rash. Later, are we having a crash crisis? We'll be talking to a think tank that has found 92% of parents say that childcare costs impact their standard of living. Now, there's a fair bit to unpack here. My initial reaction was, don't have kids you can't afford, right? And I think that's fair enough, to be honest with you. But also, when you really look at this, those people who are right at the very bottom end of the scale, they appear to be getting their kids paid for. Those who are uber wealthy, well, it doesn't matter, does it? It's your average common man and woman in that squishy middle ground and at the lower end of it who basically can't afford their kids anymore. Don't forget to send your views in. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Put that kettle on. I will see you in 2.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Yeah, welcome back, you wonderful people. It's Patrick Christie's in for Mark Steyn, who I'm reliably informed is on the mend. I know he really, really appreciates all your love and support. We all want him back as quickly as possible. Good luck to you, Mark. But it's time now for audience reactions. I asked you your thoughts on this particular chap, Maroof Hussain. He is now working in the NHS, diversity and inclusion to be specific. He had to resign in disgrace amid the old Rotherham grooming gang scandal. OK, so a former Labour Party politician who's now classically working in our public sector. Who would have thought it? Hey, Leslie says, I am disgusted. You and me both, Leslie, but not surprised. That's how low this country has sunk. I expect no better. Jean says, it's a case of not what you know, but who you know. Time we had a good clear out in the NHS of all of these ridiculous roles. They do not enhance any treatment, but give jobs to the boys on inflated salaries. And you know what? There will be people twitching this evening. There will be people twitching right across Rotherham, but also, frankly, as well, in the NHS, just scrambling around to see how on earth this chap got his job, because all of the bits and bobs about his involvement when it comes to the stifling of things to do with the Rotherham grooming scandal is all in the public domain. All in the public domain. Anyway, Edu says, disgraceful and also par for the course. Right, that's enough of those views now. Keep them coming later on in the show that you get to pummel me, where you can ask me anything, however abstract. Last week, someone asked me how many vaccines I'd had, for goodness sake. gbviews@gbnews.uk, pummel Patrick, you know the drill. Anyway, Get a load of this, people, because a year ago, former ONS statistician Jamie Jenkins scrutinised the decision for COVID advisors to be prematurely given their honours. Dr Jenny Harries, the head of the UK Health Security Agency and responsible for track and trace, received a damehood, while Professor Chris Whitty was knighted. Yeah. They were honoured for the lives they saved due to lockdowns. But what about all the lives that they put at risk because of the lockdowns? What about the people who are now dying because of lockdowns? As of now, there are reportedly 800 more people dying each week than normal levels. Sir Chris Whitty himself has just warned that thousands of middle-aged people are now dying of heart conditions after many were reluctant to bother the scared NHS during the pandemic. Whose fault was that, Chris? Whose fault was that? This year has seen a higher number of deaths than normal from preventable conditions. So, was the cure worse than the disease? Here to break it down is the man himself, former ONS statistician. He's the stat man, he's the main man. It's Jamie Jenkins. Jamie, great to see you. Happy New Year and all that jazz. Let's get stuck straight into this. Why on earth were this lot given titles, given honours? It's a scandal, isn't it?
Well, I think so, Patrick, and it kind of makes a mockery of the whole honour system. You've had it again this year. You've got Alok Sharma being given Sir Alok Sharma. He's been kind of blowing up kind of power stations the last couple of years, and he's been given a knighthood this year when you look at his contribution to combating climate change. But yeah, if we go back to last year, I was calling this out because we just gone through part of the the big part of the pandemic, and then some people would say, well, they're just doing their job. But to give out these big honours last year, and I think it's a scandal because we haven't had the COVID inquiry complete yet. It started in 2022, but it's going to take several years, obviously, to come out with things. But when you actually look at all of the facts and figures, Patrick, remember now, people have short memories, but I'm sure most people watching tonight, Patrick, will remember the podiums, which was stay home, protect the NHS, save lives. And some people say, well, what Chris Whitty was saying is stay home to stop infecting other people, not stay home and avoid the NHS. Well, that is not what the figures show, Patrick, because if you look at the data, the number of people turning up to A&E fell off a cliff. The number of patients in total in hospital during the height of the pandemic, actually, if you look at all causes, was lower, one of the lowest of the last 6 years. So people stayed away and people are dying from it.
Chris Whitty is like an absolute trigger for me, and he was at the time. When I heard next slide, please, I nearly walked into the sea one evening. I just thought, I've had enough of this, right? And to see him getting honoured, OK, I am willing to accept that his heart was in the right place, but I just do not think he understood the utter fear that he pumped into the hearts of this country with, a lot of the time, very, very, very dubious data. And it was presented as fact. I don't care what anyone says, it was presented as though this was cast iron. And it terrified people. And now look at where we are, Jamie. We've got 7 million people and the rest on an NHS waiting list. We've got excess deaths coming out of our ears. More people dying every single week than died at the height of the Afghan war, for goodness sake. We've got people now who are struggling with mental health problems, people who've got addictions because they were locked inside, elderly people, and of course people who didn't bother going to see a GP because they were worried about, they couldn't see a GP, but people who were worried about bothering the NHS. Our economy is in the toilet. And Jamie, I mean, for goodness sake, give this man a knighthood, no?
And that is what the scandal is, Patrick, because, you give a knighthood for people is recognition for perhaps doing a great job. We know not everybody who gets a knighthood has done a great job, but, why not wait until after a COVID inquiry? What if there's any criticism that comes out from this? It's going to look, a bit silly in terms of that. And you're right, you look at this time last year, Patrick, we were told if we don't have more restrictions going into not the Christmas just gone, the Christmas before, that, deaths are going to go up, the Omicron variants hit us. And what did Boris Johnson and the cabinet, in partly because Patrick, the backbenchers were kind of on his back saying, look, we can't stomach any more restrictions. Boris went against them. And then what we could do, mark the homework of SAGE, which Chris Whitty would obviously been promoting at the cabinet meetings in terms of this. And the numbers, Patrick, were 93% lower than what the models were saying last Christmas. So what would they have been like if we were marking the homework of all the lockdowns previously? But yeah, I think it's, it was a scandal this time last year. It does kind of irk me as well when you see this year and him coming out now saying that people are dying because they stayed home and avoided the NHS. Well, that's exactly what they were saying to do. And people are dying because of it. And I've seen some of the stuff on your TV station today, Patrick, clips of people and, families devastated because of this.
I did an interview that nearly brought me to tears earlier on today, just after 3 p.m, with a lovely lady called Lisa, who incredibly bravely, very tearfully, emotionally, told me about her husband's passing. He was trying to see a GP for however long, couldn't get a face-to-face appointment, was one of the many people misdiagnosed over FaceTime or Zoom on a virtual appointment. He's dead. And I'm looking at these figures now, 800 people a week dying, excess deaths. And it's not just the dead people, it's their families. And you magnify that out, or it's the people who worked for them, or their colleagues, the impact on the economy as well. I mean, instead of a knighthood, should Chris Whitty be made to apologise?
Well, I think all the politicians around at the time should be made to apologise, because ultimately, obviously, he would argue he was giving advice, and it's the politicians that where things kind of the buck stops. I would imagine there, Patrick. But right, you're right. Those heartbreaking stories, they are kind of devastating, and you hit the nail on the head with the waiting list. There's 7.2 million, but what we're seeing is, some of these waiting lists are not just people who have been on the waiting list for, say, 10, 12 weeks. The number of people waiting over a year has rocketed up as well. Waiting for heart procedures has rocketed up. And to come out and say, people avoiding the NHS and people are dying because of it, that is something that a lot of people were saying back in March 2020, that this was going to happen. And this is, I think, the point you raised there, Patrick, which I think is important to kind of pull out there, is the fear that was put in there. Because remember, we had different waves of COVID, but people stayed away from the NHS, even when there was very little COVID going around in some of the summer months, because they still felt, I better protect the NHS to save lives. And people have stayed away far too long. And we've got people who would have died, Patrick, not just because they were misdiagnosed, but because they didn't even get diagnosed in the first place.
GPs were not given the hurry up to get back into their surgeries. They were not given the hurry up at all. We had people double, triple vaccinated, etc. We had waves of coronavirus, all right, we had Omicron and stuff, but GPs needed to be back in their surgeries, and it was all too easy for them to continue down this ridiculous virtual appointment rabbit hole. And the amount of lives that will be lost there. Chris Whitty was all very well and good telling us that you needed to shut down your business, that you couldn't go out to the gym, that you couldn't do various things. You had to bankrupt yourself and sacrifice yourself at the altar of our beloved NHS. But he was no good when it came to getting that NHS back moving again. Jamie, thank you very, very much. That's former ONS statistician, the Statman, friend of the channel, Jamie Jenkins there. What do you make of all of that, people? GBViews at gbnews.uk. Coming up, is childcare a necessity? Yes? And should we be more focused on funding it? I'm a bit split on this, OK? I'm a bit split. I think you shouldn't have kids you can't afford. At the same time, I think we need to get the birth rate up a little bit. And also, as well, it's those people in the middle who are actually suffering, not your uber rich and not your really, really poor. They can just have kids on the state, can't they? Rishi Sunak, certainly, though, doesn't think the people should be funding it. Deputy Director of Onward, Adam Hawksby, is joining me on this after the break. Yes, there we go. And also, it's the end of shoe polish brand Kiwi, signalling, hear me out on this, the end of civilization. And Pummel Patrick looms. You do not want to miss that.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, the cost of living crisis is continuing to put pressure on families after reports that a third of families identified childcare costs as one of their most expensive outgoings. I think that seems pretty reasonable. The Liz Truss government had identified childcare reform as one of the key supply-side reforms to alleviate pressure on families. However, today it's been reported that Rishi Sunak is set to shelve these reforms. Now, last month, the think tank Onward published their own report into what should be done. Joining me now to discuss the potential change of course and Onward's report is the Deputy Director of Onward, Adam Hawksby. Adam, let's just deal with the facts first, OK? Why should people care about this?
Yeah. Well, they should care about it for a couple of reasons. One is because massively high childcare costs are reducing the number of workers we've got in the economy. So we know about a third of parents say that they have considered leaving work or their partner might leave work because they need to look after their kids, they can't afford childcare. But the other big reason is because it undermines strong families. I think that's one of the reasons it's popular with people on the centre right. We know that 50% of people say they considered having kids later because of the high costs of childcare. We want strong families, we want plenty of workers, then we need to be subsidising this. And right now we don't invest enough.
OK, fair enough. One of the things that I'm concerned about is a bit of a gulf here between people who are maybe right at the very bottom of our economic spectrum, who are on benefits, right? And the people right at the very top, you know, you're uber rich, who don't really have to worry about anything financially. You can argue the vast majority of people in the squishy middle ground there, are they the ones who now potentially can just not really afford to have kids?
So there is a big problem here with the kind of squeezed middle. So a lot of people that are on universal credit will have a childcare component of that will be part of their broader benefits. It's the people that fall in that bracket where they might get the 15 hours entitlement, the 13 hours entitlement, which is massively complex. It's really difficult to claim for. Things like tax-free childcare. There are 1.3 million people that are eligible for that, exactly the group you're talking about, Patrick, and only 300,000 people claim that. So it's those people in the middle that are missing out on the benefits or the subsidies they're entitled to, and they're the people who are leaving the workforce. So they are the people we need to be targeting, yes.
Now, a lot of people, especially a lot of our viewers and our listeners, think that the state is too big anyway, there are too many benefits, and that Rishi Sunak maybe paying for people to, quotes unquote, have kids they can't afford would be wrong. So people might support what Rishi Sunak is doing here. How would you respond to that?
So Liz Truss is no left-winger, and there's a reason that she was really emphasising these sorts of reforms, right? And why she framed them as a supply-side reform. It's because one of the big things holding back growth in this country is the number of people that are working. And one of the reasons they're not working, not the only one, but one of them, is because looking after children takes up too much of their time. They're not able to take the part-time job they might want to. They're not able to take the promotion they might want to, or they'd be paying more taxes that would bring more money into the exchequer. So that's why people on the right, on the centre-right, should care about this issue.
No, I think this is fascinating stuff. Now, I don't know if you got the answer to this, but it's just purely anecdotal. Are there cultural differences? Because in some cultures, it's maybe slightly more accepted for the wife to have what you could argue is maybe a more traditional role within the home, i.e. staying at home, right? Some would say that's outdated, of course. Whereas perhaps in other cultures, it's the wife, well, just, I suppose, the woman and the man are equal, right? So they can go out and work and all of this stuff. Are there cultural differences when it comes to the amount of people having the amount of kids that they do?
So there's certainly a cultural difference in terms of the amount that we invest in order to support those sorts of decisions. So we see that in Nordic countries, in particular, in places like Sweden and Denmark, they invest in this a lot more. But culturally, what a lot of countries are doing is moving away from paternity and maternity leave to just parental leave. And one of the things we recommended is you have a single set of parental leave for parents and let parents decide whether that's a mum and a dad and a dad, a mum and a mum. They can say, all right, you take 9 months, I'll take 3, or we'll take 6 each, or one takes 12 months and one takes none. The key thing here is about choice. It's about flexibility. That's a key principle that any Conservative should have, that parents should decide how they divvy these things up as opposed to the state prescribing it on them based on gender.
How expensive is childcare?
Enormously expensive. So the average parent pays for a 0 to 2 year old about 140 quid a week. That's about double the weekly shop. And that's gone up by about 20% in the past year or so. So it's past 5 years, sorry. So it's expensive and it's going up even more. And the average parents jointly spend about 26% of their income on childcare. That is 3 times the OECD average, the average of other wealthy countries, which is more like 9%. So it is expensive, and it's particularly expensive here.
Yeah, so that's the thing, isn't it? Because when you add in the fact that people will have mortgage repayments, they've got energy bills, and they've got whatever else outgoings that they do have, just normal stuff, life stuff, right? When you add a child into the mix there, and I don't know about your personal circumstances, I don't need to know, of course, but I don't mind revealing mine, which is one of the main reasons why I am yet to have a child, apart from the fact that I haven't found a woman stupid enough to want to reproduce with me, of course, is that I just couldn't afford it. And the burden on my life would be too vast. I enjoy sitting here too much and having a little bit of capital. I enjoy that a lot more right now than I enjoy having that massive strain on my life. Is that fair, do you think?
Well, Patrick, you and I are part of the 51% of people that are choosing to have kids later, and that's absolutely fine for us, but that is a massive problem. You mentioned in your introduction, our fertility rate as a country is plummeting. And you ask about cultural differences across the Western world, and this is very different to some Asian countries. We've got a massive demographic time bomb where we've got this lump of people, the kind of boomer generation, who are going to need social care, and a lack of people that are taxpayers that are younger. So it might be fine for you and me to make that decision, but if everyone makes that decision, we're going to be in big trouble.
Very quickly, very finally, is it easy to be on the take? Is it easy to be unemployed and have loads of kids and get the states to pay for them?
No, I think, to be honest, the benefits for people, particularly as they've been eroded by inflation, make that life pretty tricky. But actually, as someone on the centre right, I think that it is better for those individuals to be in work. They live more fulfilling lives in which they can realise their potential. And so what we should be doing is trying to help them get into work in whatever way we can.
Go for growth. Go for reproduction. Adam, thank you very, very much. Adam Hawksby there, director of Onward, deputy director of Onward. Sorry, I promoted him there, although I think it's only a matter of time with Adam, isn't it? Right, OK. Coming up next, does the end of the Kiwi... Hear me out on this, people. Does the end of the Kiwi shoe polish in the UK herald the end of Western civilization? If you can tell a lot about a man by his shoes, what can you tell by a nation? Well, it looks like ours is in the toilet. We'll be giving that one a good once-over with Joseph Robertson, who's director of the think tank Orthodox Conservatives, and as far as I'm aware anyway, shoeshine connoisseur, and Pummel the Patrick. It's just around the corner. Send your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can ask me anything, and I really mean that. Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Oh, hey, you caught me. Well, there we are. The end, apparently, is near for Western civilization. Why? Because we've stopped polishing our shoes. That's right. Household name brand Kiwi is to no longer sell its shoe care products in Britain. What a slovenly bunch of dullards. Quite literally now, we have become. And what a national security issue it is too. Is the army to be slaying the king's enemies without its long-trusted tins of parade gloss? Unthinkable. So, is this it? Has the West been polished off for good? The empire could never have been built by men in body warmers and Nike Jordans, could it? Or are we just a fickle lot? I personally think this is a vivid sign of Britain's decline. Is the return of proper attire to be expected as soon as we've realised that wearing soft plastic trainers with the same scruffy, bedraggled get-up all the time actually pretty depressing? Well, joining me now to discuss the fact that apparently we stopped polishing our shoes, and that's an absolute national disgrace, is Joseph Robertson, director of the Orthodox Conservative think tank. Thank you very much. Why on earth have we become so scruffy?
Well, Patrick, I think the clue is in what's been going on for the last 2 years, isn't it? We've all been working from home, and people have forgotten to dress like gentlemen and actually go and do some work outside of their homes. And, I think this is perhaps a reawakening to remember what it actually means. It sounds like a silly story, but it's not. It's kind of to do with a status symbol that has always been there and always will be there. Dressing like a gentleman. What does it mean?
Dressing like a gentleman. It's gone out of fashion, though. And this is the thing. It's gone out of fashion. And I think you're about to go on to say exactly something that I'm thinking, which this points to a sign of vivid decline, where people go more mad for Stormzy than Beethoven, for example, and now we're not even polishing our shoes, for goodness sake.
Well, I know, but I think there's still a deep-seated instinct in the British public. I like to dress in a certain way. I like my suits, and I always get some compliments. Normally, compliments hurled at me when I'm walking through London, parading whatever it is I've decided to put on that Sunday. But I think this is also, something to do with a forgotten era. A day when dressing well actually meant something, and if you go into some of the members clubs around London and some of the posh hotels, you'll notice that there's often a little box of polish down on the floor, ready to scrub up on your way into your tea or whatever it was. It was very much a status symbol, and we've kind of forgotten that. Perhaps consciously, perhaps people are trying to get rid of that sort of status. They don't like that idea of having to dress up and play a part, but I think we're losing something.
Yeah, but why do you think that the vast majority of people in this country should actually care? Because on the face of it, this is just a brand going bust or leaving this particular nation, isn't it? But actually, do you think that polishing the shoes, it means something?
Yeah, well, I remember, it's a core memory for me, polishing my shoes. I went to church as a child, and my family would always, make sure that the shoes were in the best shape possible for going out. It was kind of one of those things, the smell of the polish, you remember that. And if you had ever been in the Scouts or you'd ever been in any version of kind of those sort of things, Cubs, that kind of thing, you would have had to polish your shoes.
And that's something we're letting standards slip. We're letting standards slip at the moment, right? Because now it's become fashionable to dye your hair blue and just become as slovenly as possible. Work from home in dirty tracksuits and all of this stuff. I just feel like we're letting our standards as a nation slip, and willfully so. It's become cool to be dishevelled.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think people kind of enjoy laziness, don't they? But they don't know what they're missing out on, because I think there's definitely something when you actually make an effort, and people do get a taste of that when they go out to parties or they go out to different events. But I think the reality is that people have lost what it means to, try and play a part and actually, do something that's above and beyond the ordinary. People have tried to ordinarize everything around them, including their work lives, which I think is a shame.
Yeah, indeed. Look, Joseph, thank you very much. And it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. And speaking a lot of sense, I think, Joseph Robertson there, director of the Orthodox Conservatives think tank, reacting to the fact that Kiwi shoe polish will no longer start selling its products in England because we don't use it anymore. I do think, on a serious note, this points to a decline in this particular country now, where being smart doesn't matter. In fact, the only thing polish comes from Warsaw in this country at the moment, it would appear. Anyway, it's time for a good old Pummel the Patrick. That's right. Let's see what you give me. So this is a section, OK? It's not quite Stump the Steyn. OK, I will never be Mark Steyn. A lot of you asking how he is, by the way. Apparently Mark is on the mend. We all wish Mark well, OK? I am just merely keeping his seat warm for him while he recovers. Anyway, so Pummel the Patrick, you get to ask me anything. And Lewis has been on. He says, what's your favourite M&S ready meal? Well, it depends how close to payday it is, Lewis, because at the start of payday, my favourite M&S ready meal, by the way, there's an M&S just over the road there, which does take a pummelling from me each single day, is actually the sushi. OK, so I'll go for the sushi, lather it on with the soy sauce. Soy sauce where you make your money back, because they give it away for free. Anyway, lather it on with the soy sauce, that's fine. However, if it's towards the end of the month, Lewis, anything with a yellow sticker on it. There we go. David says, Gary or Phil Neville? Oh, grief. Well, the thing is, I mean, oh, gosh, that is like being asked to choose which toilet smells better, isn't it? Gary and Phil, both former Manchester United players, of course. I am indeed a Manchester United fan. I've made the joke before. Gary Neville, decent right-back, terrible left-winger. Phil Neville, not particularly great at either. I'm going to go Phil Neville, just because at least he's not as overtly woke as his brother. Gary just keeps harping on and on and on, doesn't he, about Labour Party this, unions this, using football commentary, some kind of party political broadcast. Gary, get a life. Pamela's been on. Pamela says, we never had any department closed in any hospital in Spain during the entire pandemic. Why, Patrick, did the whole of the NHS close? We even had cancer treatments. I am glad I live here, presumably she's in Spain. And I got a GP appointment during our lockdown. Right, OK, well, lots to unpack there, Pamela, and I will endeavour to do the absolute lots of it. Why did the whole of the NHS close? Well, I suppose people would argue, well, the whole of the NHS didn't close. It just became the National COVID Service, didn't it? Not the NHS as a whole, which I think we all came to know, didn't we? And I think it closed for a few reasons. We massively overreacted in the face of the pandemic, and actually people were very, very, very scared. And they were scared because of the likes of Chris Whitty and co, who I think were doing their best to just pump fear into people's front rooms every single day. Now, it's easy to say, well, yes, the politicians got it wrong because they listened to them, but then, of course, they were getting advice from the experts. And it was a very, very difficult combination of things to do, wasn't it? If the politicians ignored them, then they were getting hounded. You know what I think one of the biggest things was? The role of the media in all of this. Every single day, they're saying, why aren't you locking down more? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? They couldn't get it right, and so they panicked. But you know what I find absolutely outrageous? Does everyone remember the Nightingale hospitals? Yeah? What happened to them? Were they ever used? No. We spent millions, if not billions, on the Nightingale hospitals. They were a great triumph of human engineering for a while. We had the Excel Centre in London. I think Wales's Principality Centre Principality Stadium, I should say, was turned into a giant hospital. Were any of them ever really used? No, we could do with them now, though, couldn't we? We could do with them like the giant, great, big overflow car parks for NHS treatments. I think it will go down as an absolute national scandal what happened there, and I cannot wait for the results of this COVID inquiry to emerge that actually, if we ever have anything like this again, then we should make sure, and it should be a matter of public consultation, that we have some form of vote on the response that we take to it. Because if you'd have given people the choice, as we now know, to suffer economic ruin, people not be able to get cancer treatments, for example, routine healthcare appointments to be a struggle, GPs not wanting to see you face-to-face, children with catastrophic mental health problems, kids not being able to talk, walk, massive amounts of learning difficulties, etc., all of that stuff, I don't think people would have behaved in the way that they did then. And just very final one, David says, when does stubble become a beard? David, I wouldn't know, because I can't grow either. Mark Dolan is here, covering for the wonderful Dan Wootton. Mark, you legend, what's on the agenda tonight?
Not as much of a legend as you, Patrick. Happy New Year, big guy, and I wish you all the best for 2023. My New Year's resolutions, also, the NHS has reached the point of no return. Another winter, another crisis. It's enough to make you sick. Plus, what about siblings? We've heard that Prince Harry wants to make up with William. Is blood thicker than water? We'll speak to TV legend Kim Woodburn, plus the papers and my all-star panel. But that monologue's on its way. Don't go anywhere. See you in 3.
Yes, Mark, absolutely fantastic stuff. Well, thank you very much. That's going to be Mark Dolan with you. Covering for Dan Wootton, I've been Patrick Christys. As Mark Steyn would say, stay safe, stay free.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK's looking chilly to start with in the east, with wind and rain spreading from the west. Let's take a look at the details. Starting off across Scotland, and after a cold start to the night, temperatures will have begun to rise by 7 a.m. as rain and hill snow pushes eastwards across the country. Meanwhile, it'll be mostly dry for Northern Ireland, but some further heavy rain and strong winds are going to arrive by lunchtime. It'll be a cloudy, wet and windy start across much of northwest England with outbreaks of rain. A milder morning than of late, though. In North Wales, it'll be a similar picture with outbreaks of rain and blustery winds. The rain could be heavy at times through the morning, but the heaviest rain will come later in the day. A drier and clearer picture further east. Cloud will be starting to push into the West Midlands, but for the East Midlands, it's looking fine at first, but the rain will arrive here later. A chilly start for East Anglia. Clear skies overnight will allow for a touch of frost, but will then also bring plenty of sunshine at first before turning wet later. Towards the south coast, there'll be outbreaks of rain sweeping eastwards across most parts through the morning. After a brief dry spell, further heavy rain is to come. The cloud and rain will spread eastwards to all parts throughout the morning, with heavier rain arriving throughout the afternoon.
On Dan Wootton tonight, it's Mark Dolan in for the big man with my first show of 2023. In my Big Opinion monologue,